Okay, hello everyone. Oh, a couple of last minute stragglers. Okay, so welcome to Please Bring Me Coffee, also known as using iBeacons to seamlessly engage with our mobile apps. Now, obviously, we're at a Microsoft conference, so everywhere you look, there's Windows, there's Surface. So today we're going to talk about an Apple technology, we're going to talk about mainly iOS, and I'm going to do my demos using a Mac, because I like to be different. So what we're going to talk about today is iBeacons. We're going to talk about what they are, how they work, how we can use them to add contextual awareness to our apps, how we can use them to add indoor location awareness to our apps. We're going to talk about some of the things you can do with them, and then we're going to focus on the things that can go wrong. We're going to have a little bit of code, show you how easy it is to use them, and we're going to have a bit of fun. My name's Jim. I'm a local Xamarin developer. Work for eRoad over in the North Shore. I'm also one of the organisers of the Auckland Xamarin Meetup. We're hosting a Xamarin Dev Days, 19th of November. If you do Xamarin, come along to that. And today, though, I think the biggest thing we're going to talk about is coffee. Who drinks coffee? Most of you. Who here regularly goes to a coffee shop to buy a cup of coffee? First thing in the morning, maybe go and buy a cup of coffee, take it to work. A few of us do this. It's hard. You may think it's easy. It's actually hard. You have to walk to the coffee shop, and you might be listening to music, nosing at channel 9 on your phone, but you've got to go into the coffee shop. You've got to queue up. You have to wait. You then have to talk to a person. That means taking your headphones off, actually interacting with another human. You order a coffee. It's probably the same coffee you order every day, but you still have to do it. You pay for it. Same amount you pay every day. You still have to do it. You then have to go and wait somewhere for someone to shout your name for you to get your coffee, which means you can't have your headphones on, you can't be watching your Channel 9 videos. Not so great. We live in a seamless world with some of our mobile apps. Things like Uber. From my house, I can tap a button, I get a notification to say a car's here. I get in the car, I get out the car the other side. I don't talk to people, I can keep my headphones on. I don't have to worry about paying. It's seamless. Coffee, something we all do, is hard. So what would be the best way to have a coffee shop? What would be awesome is if I could say to my app, every time I go into my favorite coffee shop, I want a flat white. And then when it's ready, I want someone to bring it to me. I don't want to have to listen for my name. I don't want to have to order. I just want to walk in, sit down, read Twitter, listen to my music, and my coffee appear. That's the Uber of coffee shops. And today we're going to talk about how we can achieve that. So let's start by just taking a little step back from that. We interact with our apps all the time. We interact with the real world all the time. Sticking with the coffee theme, this is an app by James Montemagno, the evangelist at Xamarin, where you can look up coffee shops. I can use this app to find a coffee shop, interact with the app. I walk into the coffee shop, order, I interact with the real world. But what if our apps could interact with the real world for us? What if the act of walking into a coffee shop automatically caused our app to order the coffee for us? What if just by sitting down in a coffee shop was able to tell that coffee shop where I'm sitting so my coffee can come to me? That's what we'd like to do with our apps. And we can do that with iBeacons. So with iBeacons, we can build contextually aware and indoor location aware mobile apps. This is kind of the big ticket item. This is what we can do with iBeacons. Context-aware, indoor location-aware mobile apps. So obviously, this is a Microsoft conference, so I'm going to be talking about Xamarin here. The technologies we're going to be talking about are mainly Apple technologies. We're going to look at the iOS SDKs using the Xamarin wrappers, because Objective-C is just nasty. But we're going to dive briefly into what you can do on Android and Windows as well. So, set the stage a bit. What are iBeacons? Who knows what iBeacons are? Okay, a few of you, not everyone. Okay, here's one, made by a company called Estimate. Who wants it? Your hand was up first, sir. One for you. There you go. Come see me afterwards, I'll tell you how to get it all set up. So iBeacons is actually a technology defined by Apple. Because hey, it's a Microsoft conference. Who doesn't want to talk about Apple? So back in WWDC 2000 and something, when iOS 6 was released, Apple put a little note in a slide about these things called iBeacons and how you could use them to add awareness to your apps. They were quite a good idea, but they weren't really made a big thing of. Now, the idea of an iBeacon is just like a real-world beacon, such as a lighthouse. The idea of a beacon is it transmits information one way, and from that information, you get some understanding of the context that you're in, and you can make a decision. A classic example is a lighthouse. Sits on a rock, big beam of light, spins round. And any ships passing see the lighthouse. What does it mean? Land, rocks, be careful. Make sure you know what you're doing, especially at night. Watch out what you're doing. It's a beacon, it's a one-way transmission of information. It's not two-way. It's not a case of, I'm here, ships have to phone the lighthouse and say, what do you mean? I'm in a ship, I see a lighthouse, oh shit, rocks, I'm going to stop, I'm going to be careful. One-way transmission of information. And Apple decided that they could use that same idea, but with Bluetooth. So rather than have a lighthouse, beam of light, and a ship, they use a Bluetooth low-energy advertising packet with some form of information encoded in that they broadcast out and anyone can detect. Now, BLE advertising is a standard technology. This is not Apple specific. Anyone can do advertising packets. It's very easy. It's a small packet of data, gets broadcast, anything can receive it, and you can do some of that information. This is not the Bluetooth you get in your car. You are not trying to pair your phone with anything. You're not typing in passcodes and all that painful stuff that you have to do. It's nothing like that. It's a simple broadcast. Anyone can pick it up. So I've got a few iBeacons around here. If anyone's running something like BLE Explorer on their phone or any kind of Bluetooth Explorer app, you could launch it and you could see the signals that I'm transmitting. So there's no magic here. It's a simple advertising packet sent out every so often by one of these devices. 100 milliseconds is the Apple standard for an iBeacon packet. So what is an iBeacon packet? What makes this BLE advertising packet an iBeacon rather than anything else? It's just the format of data that's encoded in it. So Apple said, here is a standard for these packets. We're not going to make iBeacons. Apple do not make iBeacons. They just set the standard. Other people make the hardware. But Apple said, if you want to have an iBeacon, you have to do two things. First of all, you have to encode 3 pieces of data inside your packet. A nice big GUID, which they call a proximity UUID, which is a bit of a mouthful, and then a major and a minor version number. So 3-part number. Big ID, major and minor version. Major and minor are 16-bit integers. And the second thing Apple said, if you want to make an iBeacon, is you have to pay us for the rights to use iBeacon. It's like $1 or so under the MFI program. So you'll find other beacon manufacturers publishing the same data under different names, not iBeacon, but essentially the same thing. So inside this beacon is a little transmitter, and every 100 milliseconds or so sends out a packet of data, proximity ID, major, minor. Now, as well as this, the BLE advertising standard has a few bits of extra information that get encoded with it, such as the manufacturer's information, so certain bits of information about the manufacturer, and the transmission power. And this is a measurement made by the manufacturer of the power of the signal that's being broadcast. This is all standard BLE advertising stuff. This is nothing special to iBeacons. All advertising packets have this information. So that's what iBeacon is, an ID and a transmission power. Doesn't sound that impressive, does it? Doesn't sound that much. But it's what you do with it that counts. So the first thing you can do with it is build context-aware applications. So many years ago, when Apple first started on the iPhone route, they put some GPS code into their SDKs. And they allow you to write geofenced applications. And these geofenced applications allow you to say that if my device enters a GPS region, a region defined as a latitude, a longitude, and a radius, if my phone enters that region, an app can be woken up and given a small amount of background time, I think it's about 3 minutes or so, to do things. So for example, you could write an app for Sky City, and whenever you're within 100 meters of Sky City, your app wakes up, gets some processing time in the background, not foreground. You can't push an app to the foreground, ever. Apple say no. But you get some processing time in the background to do whatever you want to do, such as check you in automatically to a hotel room or order your drinks or whatever. And that was great, but that involves GPS. GPS is not particularly reliable, especially inside large shopping centers where you've got roofs. It's not particularly accurate because the US don't want you to be accurate. The new Chinese satellites and European satellites can help with this, but you still can't get total accuracy. And I say, doesn't work inside large buildings. So they said, let's take this idea and let's expand it to include a different type of region. Rather than a GPS region, let's have an iBeacon region. Now, an iBeacon region is defined as when your phone can detect a signal from one or more beacons with the same ID. Now, that can be just the same proximity UUID. You can have 10 beacons, same proximity UUID, different major, different minor. That can be a region. Or you can say it's proximity plus major, or you can say proximity plus major plus minor. However you want to define it, a region is when I detect a signal from one or more beacons with the same ID. And then it defines leaving this region as when I can no longer detect a signal for a period of 30 seconds of any beacons matching this ID. So it's I enter the region when first time I pick up a signal, I exit the region 30 seconds after I lose the signal. Just like with GPS, I enter the region when GPS detects that I'm 100 meters from Sky City, and then I exit when it detects I'm more than 100 meters from Sky City. And just like GPS regions, when your device enters or leaves the region, it can wake your app up. So I could take my coffee shop, and I could put a stack of beacons all around my coffee shop, all with the same ID, and then when I walk in to my coffee shop, my iOS app detects I've entered the region, it wakes my app up. I've got 3 minutes in the background. I can send a message to the servers to say, this guy's here, he wants some coffee. Coffee gets ordered automatically. So suddenly we've got this capability to detect when I enter a location, but I'm not limited by GPS, I'm not limited by roofs, I'm just based on having multiple beacons. And we've got so much control over this. If I have a 2-story coffee shop, I can have beacons on one story and different beacons on another story. So suddenly I can know which floor I'm in on the coffee shop. Try doing that with GPS. You can't do it. So we've got this power to understand our location in terms of being inside, in terms of being close to beacons, in terms of which floor of a coffee shop we're on, etc. So we can get some kind of contextual awareness. And this works as soon as your app has been run once. So literally, I install an app. As part of my app's code, at some point it says, I want to monitor, keyword there, they talk about monitoring a region. I want to monitor a region based off an ID, proximity ID, and optionally the major and minor version. I want to monitor this region, and when I enter the region, I want the app to wake up. Once it's registered, that's it. It's registered with the OS. Your app does not need to be running. You can double tap, you can close your app, terminate it, doesn't matter. Once it's registered, it's registered. And then as soon as you move in range of a beacon, iOS wakes your app up. Bang, done. So this is cool. Suddenly we've got this way to put beacons around our coffee shop. And these beacons could be in a fixed location in a coffee shop that GPS could work for, or they could be in a coffee shop that's in a shopping mall where GPS wouldn't work. Or it could be on a mobile coffee cart that could be anywhere. Doesn't matter. We detect the beacon, we wake up. And you can do this with 5 or 6 lines of code. So let's do it. Let's show this. This is probably the best way to cement these ideas, is to actually show it. So, is that the right button? Can we see my screen? Excellent. So yeah, as you all heard from Donovan Brown yesterday, he hates Macs. Well, he's wrong. Macs are awesome. So I'm on a Mac here. Are you all Xamarin developers? A few of you. Okay. Who uses Objective-C? Boo. Shame on you, sir. Shame on you. Okay, so this is Xamarin Studio, for those who don't recognize it. You can do exactly the same as this on Visual Studio on Windows, as long as you're connected to a Mac to do the final builds. I'm doing it on Xamarin Studio because Macs are awesome. So I've got here a very simple single-page iOS application, single-view application. Nothing fancy here. I'm inside my app delegate. Who knows iOS programming? Who's fairly familiar with this? Yeah, okay. So your app delegate in iOS is your application. It's the main class that gets run when your app starts up. So your app launches, kicks off this delegate, and this has got all your lifecycle methods for your application. So in here's a method called finish launching, which, who can guess when this method gets called? Anyone? When the app starts. Who said that? iBeacon for you, sir. Right, so in here, I've got a little bit of code I've written to show a local notification, which I'm not going to go into because that's boring. And then the only thing that's relevant to beacons is I've predefined a proximity ID because I can't be bothered to type it out, and I've declared a location manager. Now, this location manager that we use for iBeacons is the same location manager used for geofences, for GPS-based code. If you've done any location-based code on iOS, this is the same thing that you've used. It's all the same. Now, first thing I have to do with my location manager is I have to ask for permission by request. And there's two types of permission I can ask for. So, I assume most of us are iPhone users? Yeah, excellent. How many times have you launched an app and a box has popped up to say, this app wants permission to use your location? Sometimes it says when the app is in use, sometimes it says always. You have to get permission from the user before you can use any kind of location services, and this is the same for GPS and for iBeacons. So we have to ask for permission. There's two types of permission you can get on iOS, always and when in use. When in use is when your app is in the foreground, so when you've actively launched your app. Always is all the time, including in the background. Now, we want to do always because we want our app to be in the background, to be terminated, so that we can walk into our coffee shop. It doesn't matter what we're doing with our device, whether it's in our pocket, whether it's looking at Twitter, we want our coffee ordered. So we want to request always authorization. Now, you have no control over the request. You can ask for it, and that's it. You don't control the dialogue. You can't style the dialogue the way you want. This is for your protection. So when you request it, Apple's got its own dialogues to say whether you want permission, because obviously if you had control of that, you could do some nefarious things. The only control you do have is you can provide a bit more information using an entry in your info plist called the location usage description. There's two usage descriptions. There's the always usage description for if you request always authorization, and the when in use usage description, which is a bit of a tongue twister, for when your app is in use. And you can put information in here, and your job here is to convince your users to let you access their location. Because a lot of people go, no, I don't want you to have access, and turn it off. So this is your chance to explain to users why you must have location permissions to do whatever you want to do. So once I've done this, I can then wire up an event to the authorization changed to handle when they set anything. Now, you always have to request authorization. Even if they've already said yes, you still have to request it. It's just that once they've said yes once, when you request it, the event gets fired immediately. No dialogue, event gets fired. And in here, I can just do a quick sanity check. If e.status does not equal authorization status, always return. So if they said no, we drop out, don't do anything. If they said yes, we're good to go. Now you see all these things have got CL in front of them. CL authorization status, CL location manager. This is all parts of core location. All parts of the core iOS SDK that Xamarin has very kindly wrapped for you. So we're using C#, but we're accessing the core native iOS SDKs. There's no magic, there's no vendor SDKs here, pure native stuff. So the next thing I want to do is we want to define a region. And there's two types of regions. You've got circular regions, you've got beacon regions. Circular is for GPS, lat, long, radius. Beacon is the one we're interested in. And when I define my beacon region, there's three constructors that I care about. One that takes a proximity ID and then has an identifier, proximity major minor. So as I said, you can define your region based off, at the very least, the big proximity ID, optionally major and minor. And we'll talk about why you want to do these things in different ways later on. So for now, I just want to create a new NSUUID, pass in this string that I've already got there. Oh. And then I have to give this a name. And the reason you have to name this is you can actually have multiple regions. So you can have, if you have 2 floors in your coffee shop, you have different IDs for each floor, and you have one region for the bottom floor, one region for the top floor. You can have different regions. There's a limit on how many you can have, but you can have different regions. And then when the events are fired to say that you've entered a region, you can see which region's been entered based off this ID. So I'm going to go into my location manager, and I'm going to start monitoring my region. You see here, start monitoring, takes a CL region. So it's exactly the same code for GPS and iBeacons. If you're used to doing GPS work, it's the same thing. Same method that you're calling. I'm just passing in my CL beacon region, which is derived from CL region. And then all I need to do now is wire up some events. So there's a region entered event. Oh, for some reason I've decided to put that right at the top. Let's put that somewhere a bit more sensible. And then I can do the same thing with region left. Create a new event for that and drop it down the bottom here. And then in these, I can do whatever I want.
Did you put stop or start?
Oh, good spot. Well done. Oh, could you pass that over to him? I did that on purpose just to make sure you're all awake. Yeah. So yeah, and so in here I can just do some code such as to send a simple notification. So coffee is ordered, and I can do the same thing to say, you know, goodbye when we leave the region. Yeah, whatever. And that's it. That's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code, and suddenly we've got something that can wake our devices up, or wake our app up as soon as we enter a coffee shop. So I'm going to just quickly demo this. I'm not going to run this code here. The reason I'm not going to run it is because once you've registered a beacon region, it takes a couple of minutes before the OS picks up and starts work. And if I ran this code right now, you'd have to wait a couple of minutes for it to kick in before I can demo it. So in true Blue Peter style, for any English people amongst you, here's one I prepared earlier. So I've got an iBeacon here. It's made by a company called Estimote. That's the people who make the beacons I've been throwing around. They're awesome. I have no affiliation to Estimote. They don't pay me for saying so, but their stuff rocks. If you want to get cool beacons, get Estimote stuff. And I've got one of their beacons here, which is currently turned off. So rather than walk out the room and walk back in again, I'm just going to turn it over to get the signal going. And you should see, if the demo gods are on my side, oh, it's not doing it. How dare you not do it? What you should have seen is a notification pop up. Okay? It should have popped up. It was doing it all this morning. It was doing it all yesterday. Trust me on this. I'm an expert. Can we fudge this in the edit later on for the video? Thanks. So I've just turned it over to turn it off, and hopefully we'll get the exit notification. And that takes about 30 seconds, because once your app has detects the signal, it can wake up. But to know that you've left, it has to have a little bit of grace period. Because although these beacons should be broadcasting every 100 milliseconds, signals can get blocked. So it might take a bit longer than 100 milliseconds for everything to happen. So that's why you have to wait 30 seconds. And it really is not going to... Let's try it again. Are you going to work for me? Oh. I've got everything turned on. I say it was working. Yeah, it's all turned on. It was working earlier on. And that's really quite embarrassing. Okay, trust me, it works. Honest. Oh well. So let's just jump from that back to the slides. And you know, as soon as I do this, I'm going to get a notification. You're not going to see it. Okay. So working on the principle that actually worked. So we've seen that. Well, we haven't seen, but you just trust me, that when I walk into a coffee shop that's got beacons, my app wakes up, it runs, I can do something. And, now it's gone and shown the notification. There you go, notification that I left. And if I turn it over, notification that's turned on. So there you go, a little bit delayed, but proof it works. So this is great for our coffee shop. We can have beacons in our coffee shop. We walk in, things happen. But that's not truly context awareness. It just tells us that we're somewhere, which itself is great, fantastic for coffee. But we could do a whole lot more. So we can think about when we transmit the ID. We can transmit all the time, like in a coffee shop, or we can transmit as and when required. Simple example, I had a beacon upside down, no transmission. I turn it the right way up, it transmits. My device can understand whether my beacon is upside down or not based off detecting that region. But we can do a lot more. So Estimote, again, I love their stuff, they've got these things called stickers. Little iBeacons you can stick on things that can do a lot more than just very simple ID broadcasting. They've got accelerometers in them. So when you move one of these, they start broadcasting. Sorry?
Like the Nike Plus, the old system, Nike Plus.
Put in your shoe, yeah, and as you start running, it detects and scores. Yeah, similar kind of thing. Accelerometer starts the whole thing off. And these ones, they're a classic example. You put it on a shoe in a retail store. You have the retail store app installed on your phone in your pocket. You pick the shoe up. Accelerometer detects that it's moving, starts broadcasting an ID. Your device picks that up because it's broadcast at very low power, so it's just close range. You get a buzz in your pocket or on your Apple Watch. You get your phone out, notification. I see you're looking at these rather fine-looking shoes. Tap on the notification. Inside the app, there's a list of the styles, the colors, the sizes that they have, the price, all that information, and maybe a button to summon a sales assistant to help you with it. So suddenly you've got more context awareness. You're not just aware of where you are, you're aware of what you're doing. You can put stickers on bikes. You lift your bike up to put it down the road, you climb on your bike, you start riding. Whilst it's moving, an ID is transmitted. That wakes your app up, starts recording your cycle ride. So suddenly you don't have to go into Map My Ride and start riding. You could use an app that uses accelerometer-based iBeacons. As soon as you move the bike to get on to start riding, it starts recording your journey. The latest iBeacons, these ones here, they've got light sensors in them. So they only broadcast when the lights are turned on. You could use that to make sure that, maybe a reminder, because if the time is a certain time and your lights are still on, you're still at work, you get a notification on your phone and say, oi, go home. Or you could use it to see if someone's left the fridge open, lights in fridges. They've got temperature sensors in them. You get different ID depending on the temperature. I mean, I'm a type 1 diabetic, I have insulin, I keep it in the fridge. I've got an iBeacon in my fridge. If it gets too warm, I get a notification on my phone because it transmits an iBeacon ID, it transmits this advertising packet based off the temperature. So much you can do with these beacons to understand your context. It's not just, I am within proximity to a beacon. There's a lot you can do just based on movement or moving the beacon around or temperature or so many more things. But not only that, you can also wire these beacons into iOS 10 notifications. So finally, they've done something new. Apple did iBeacons, then forgot about them. Since then, Google have come along and done loads of cool beacon things. And Apple is starting to catch up. They've bolted into notifications. Who's on iOS 10? Probably everybody? Yeah, everyone is. iOS 10's got cool notifications in there, and they've even got new trigger types on the notifications. So you can trigger a notification based on location. So you can say, in your app, when I enter a beacon region, or when I leave a beacon region, I want to see a notification. So you don't have to write the code yourself, you don't have to monitor yourself. It's all done using location notification triggers. And these work for iBeacons, they work for GPS regions as well. And the biggest upside to these is if you register for these notifications, it's the OS that detects your region and the OS that shows the notification, not your app. So your app has no access to the user's location until your app is in the foreground. And this means when you request permissions, you don't have to request always permission. If you want to use this, you only have to request when in use permission. And that's a big advantage because people don't like you monitoring their location. If your coffee shop app said, hey, we want to use your location all the time, people might say no. But if it says we want to use your location just when you're using the app, people are more likely to say yes. And so I could wire one of these up to my coffee shop app. I walk in, it detects the iBeacon region. My app's not woken up, but a notification is sent. Notification says, hey, welcome back, Jim. Would you like your usual coffee, please? And I can use the new iOS 10 notification features, tap yes, please, I want a coffee. It will then launch my app and automatically order a coffee for me. So I can do this with a bit less permissions. Where they're going to go next with this, I don't know. Google have done a lot of work with beacons, so I'm hoping Apple will up their game and start doing some more cool stuff. So that's context. This is how we can put beacons in our coffee shop and automatically order our coffee. But I'm lazy. I don't want to have to listen for someone to shout my name and then go and collect my own coffee. I just want to sit down. I want my coffee to come to me. So we can do this using indoor location-aware apps. So remember I said BLE advertising packets have a transmission power. Manufacturer's indication of what the strength of the signal is, how much oomph it's got when it's sending out the signal. Now, from this transmission power, you can actually work out how far away from the beacon you are. Because in the OS, when it tells you about a beacon, it tells you what the relative signal strength to that beacon is. It's a thing called an RSSI, relative signal strength indication. And that's a measurement of how strong the signal is that you've received. And then using a little bit of funky maths, you can convert how strong the broadcast is, how much you've received, into an estimation of the distance from you to the beacon through clear air. I'm going to say that bit again, estimation through clear air. Now, Apple obviously like to take it a bit further because maths is hard. They don't like doing hard stuff, so they do the maths for you. And they actually can give you an indication of the distance as a rough guess. This is called ranging. So when you enter a beacon region, that's monitoring. That's you enter a region, and any beacon that gets detected wakes you up. When your app is in the foreground, when your app is running, you can then range for these beacons. And that gives you a list of all the beacons that you can see. And for those beacons, it can tell you what its ID is, what its major, what its minor is, and the relative signal strength indicator, and this idea of distance. One beacon's not so interesting. Lots of beacons is interesting. So imagine, for the sake of argument, this is a square room rather than this long one. Imagine it's 10 meters by 10 meters, big square. And I've got an iBeacon in the middle of every single wall. Now, I've got my app running. It's in the foreground. It's ranging. It's getting all this information about these beacons. And it says the estimated distance to each beacon is 5 meters. Where am I standing? Who said it first? You. There you go. So yeah, I can suddenly know my indoor location. I'm in the middle. If it says, right, you're 9 meters from that beacon, 1 meter from that beacon, and about 7 point something from that one and that one, I know I'm standing near the back of the room. So suddenly with 4 beacons, I know roughly where I am. Not millimeter precision, not enough to measure the tolerances on aircraft or anything like that, but enough to know which table you're sitting at in a coffee shop. I can know roughly where your phone is. Oh, there's a table 4 by the window. Let me bring this person their coffee. So suddenly we've got some location capabilities. Yeah, we've got this idea that I can walk into a coffee shop, my app gets launched, coffee gets ordered, then when my coffee's ready, someone can bring it to me. Now, we can only get this information when your device is running. When your app is running, when your app is awake. Doesn't have to be in the foreground, but it has to be awake. You only get 3 minutes or so of background processing time to gather this information. So when I enter an iBeacon region, I've got 3 minutes to start sucking down all this information. After that 3 minutes, I need something else to wake my app up. So thinking about our coffee shop example, it's probably going to be more than 3 minutes from when the coffee is ordered to when it's ready. So something has to be done to wake my app up for it to get this information about where I am. This is not a continuous stream that happens all the time. It's just when your app is awake. But we can use things like push notifications to nudge the app awake, and that gives us 3 minutes of data. So let's just have a quick look at that. I'm not going to write the code for this one. I'm just going to show you what we do. So I'm in a view controller. For those of you who don't do iOS programming, this is basically the code behind for a view. And in here, I've got my location manager. I've got another big proximity ID, because I can't be bothered to type it. And I've got 2 majors, one called Beetroot, one called Candy. The reason for the strange naming is not because I'm odd. It's because I'm using a beetroot-coloured Estimo beacon and a candy floss-coloured one. That's their names, not mine. I don't work for paint companies to come up with stupid names. That's their names for them. What I'm doing here is when my view is open, so when my app is running, I'm ranging beacons. So I call start range beacons with a region, exactly the same type of region we use for monitoring. And then I have an event that gets fired every time it ranges a beacon. So what happens is every few hundred milliseconds, this event will be fired with information about all the beacons that have been captured in that last period of time. So you may not get all your beacons every time. I've got 2 here. This event could be called with both beacons, maybe just one, maybe none. But it will get called on a regular interval with information about what it's gathered. And in my did range beacons event, I have these CL region beacons ranged event args. iOS is definitely crying out for namespaces, horrible long names. And in here, I can iterate through the beacons. And this is all the beacons it's detected in that last pass. And against each beacon, we have a number of characteristics, such as, let me just make this a bit bigger. So we've got major, minor, proximity UUID. Proximity is kind of a rough guess as to where it is. Near, intermediate, far, unknown. Not particularly useful. RSSI, this is the relative signal strength indicator, the raw number, the raw amount of signal that's been received, and then accuracy. Because for some reason, when you've got a rough distance, Apple likes to call it accuracy. This is the rough estimated distance in meters to your beacon. No idea why it's called accuracy. Feels like a dumb name to me, but there we go. Now, when we get this list of beacons that come through, we'll always have the IDs. The accuracy may not come through. If it can't really interpret the signal, if it doesn't really know how far away it is, if there's interference, we sometimes get an accuracy of 0. So I'm just filtering those out. I'm then going through looking at the major version number. And this is how I can discriminate between my beacons. So if I was putting beacons around this room, they'd all have the same proximity ID, but they'd have different major or minor numbers. So I can discriminate which one it is and work out my relative position. So if my major is this major ID of my beetroot beacon, I'm storing the value for distance. If it's to my candy beacon, I'm storing the distance. And then I'm doing a little bit of code just to display it on screen. And to show you that in action, I will just launch my app. And I'll lean over here and hopefully not fall over. And you should better see, yeah, I'm kind of roughly in the middle. And if I come over this way, you see, so very, very basic indoor location to tell me where I am on the speaker stage. Now, as I said, these are estimated numbers through clear air. So if I wanted to move myself further away from that beacon, I could just do this. And that should, when it catches up with itself, zip back the other way. I'll take my hand out of the way. And it should, if it's going to do it, start going back. Put my hand there again. Hopefully that should be enough. So there we go, a little bit movement around. So it's not particularly accurate. You get things in the way, things can go a little bit wrong. So you really have to think about how much can I trust these numbers, what can I do? If you're using Estimate beacons, they've got a whole indoor location SDK that does all the hard stuff for you and can think about when things are in the way. So it can kind of work out where you've got blockages. I don't really know how it works, but yeah, look at that. It says I'm near the pink one. Nowhere near it. So, zipping back to the slides. So that's indoor location awareness. So just using a few lines of code, we've got an app that wakes up when I walk into my coffee shop. I've got an app that can tell the coffee shop where I am, and my coffee comes to me. We've reached coffee shop utopia. Awesome. But we've reached coffee shop utopia on iOS. Now, all the cool kids have iOS, obviously. But what about those poor people on Android? Who's on Android? Sorry, didn't mean to insult you. Sorry. Android's awesome. Google is much better than Siri, I must admit. So what about Android? So all this stuff is baked into iOS. It's in the operating system. Android, it's not. Android has full Bluetooth capability. As of 4.3, KitKat or whatever one that is, Jelly Bean or something, I can never remember the names. But as of 4.3, you have full BLE control. So you can write this code yourself. All you have to do is create a background service that runs a BLE scan and then detect when you get a beacon, kick your app awake. You can write that code yourself. You can't write the code yourself on iOS. You have to rely on the operating system. Android, you can write it yourself. Or just use a vendor SDK. So Estimote provide an SDK for these beacons that wraps the basic iOS one but gives you more capabilities such as checking the temperature or the battery life of your beacon. They also have a Android SDK. And you write code that looks pretty much the same as what I did on iOS, on Android, and you get the same capabilities. But it's not baked into the OS, it's a bit more power hungry. It scans every 20 seconds or whatever you configure it to be, looking for these advertising packets, and if it finds it, wakes your app up. It's not instant like iOS, it's a scan. You want to make it more instant, get it to scan more often. Downside is that drains your battery. On iOS, the power drain from monitoring iBeacons is negligible. On Android, you check every 5 seconds. It's going to have a bit of a negative impact on battery. But the code is easy to write. It's vendor SDKs, or if you want to write it yourself, it's not hard. What about Windows? Who's got Windows Phone? Okay, obviously. So Windows, same as Android. It has all the SDKs there. It's got all the code you need to do it. You just have to write it yourself. You have to write the background service, does the BLE scan, kicks it awake. The vendors don't provide SDKs for this, not that I've seen. I'm happy to be corrected, but I've never seen a vendor-provided SDK. There may be some vendors that do it. I'm getting a yes, they do from that side of the room. Some vendors do it. I'm happy to be corrected there, but I certainly haven't come across one. So you just write it yourself. Plenty of open source examples. Go on GitHub. There's plenty of examples on how to do it. So all those capabilities you can put into iOS. You can put those on Android. You can put those in Windows. It's just a little bit more work for you, unless you want to leverage an SDK or leverage someone else's work. So although iOS is awesome, Macs are cool, anyone can do this. So, bringing it all together. We've seen what we can do with coffee shops, and that's all I care about is coffee shops. But you may have other things that you're interested in. What can we do with beacons, apart from getting coffee? So this picture comes from Estimote. Yes, I know I keep harping on about Estimote, but they're awesome. This is their idea of the future of retail. These are the things you can do with beacons to get more power into your mobile apps. If you're running a big retail store, put beacons on the walls. That way you can track people's indoor location. Great for nosing about what they're doing, great for tracking people's footfall to optimize the way that you lay out your store. Also good if you want to serve people. Someone picks up a shoe. Yeah, I like this shoe. Notification on their phone. Yep, I want a sales assistant. You know where they are. You can come to them. They're even taking this further. Estimote have actually now got beacons that plug into TVs that detect when you're close by, interact with an app, display content on the TV. They've rolled this out to Qatar Airport. So if you've got the Qatar Airways app installed on your phone, you walk up to a big screen, the beacon plugged into the big screen, wakes your app up. Your app has got all your flight information, connects back to a little computer plugged into the big screen, tells it who you are, and it says, "Hi Jim, your flight is in 2 hours from gate 36. I do nothing, I just walk up to a screen and it tells me what my flight is. It's all there, it's all done for me, all thanks to the power of beacons. Another place they're using them is for indoor location in stadiums. They're rolling this out in baseball stadiums across the US, theatres, cinemas. How many times have you gone into a big stadium, 80,000 seats, and you think, where the hell is my seat? I'm in row 8, section 124, seat 17. You've got no clue. But if you can get your app out, and it shows you a map of the stadium, and it says, you're here, your seat's over there, suddenly I've got this capability to find my seat much, much easier. They're doing it in theatres, finding seats. I don't have to barge past lots of people and go, oh, wrong row. Barge back past people, change row. I can do all this very, very simply from indoor location. I can use it to find where the beer is, where the toilets are, because it can tell me where I am. The nearest toilets are over there. I can even use it to order beer. I want a beer, I'm sitting here. Someone can come and bring me a beer to my seat, because they know where I am. So all this indoor location opens up a whole world of possibilities as what you can do. So they're great. We can do retail, we can do stadiums, we can do museums. Brooklyn Museum in the US. They've got beacons everywhere. Walk up to an exhibit, tells you all about it on your phone because it knows what exhibit you're standing next to because it's got beacons. Great for audio guides. Walk up to exhibit, got my audio guide plugged in, got the app kicks in, tells me all about it. I walk away, audio stops, off to this one, tells me about this one. Loads of capabilities what we can do with these things because our apps understand our context, understand where we are, understand our location, all internally. But it's not all unicorns and rainbows. It can all go horribly, horribly wrong. So, pop quiz. Who here has Bluetooth on their device turned off? None of you can use iBeacons. Sorry. Bluetooth has to be turned on. People like turning Bluetooth off. There is this perception that Bluetooth drains your battery quite substantially. And this is not always an incorrect perception, especially if you're constantly scanning in the background on Android looking for beacons. Bluetooth can drain your battery. A lot of people think it definitely does drain your battery. A lot of people turn it off. So if you're trying to target an audience and they don't have Bluetooth turned on, you're screwed. If I walk into a coffee shop without my Bluetooth turned on, I don't get my coffee. Now, having this seamless coffee experience may be enough to get me to turn it back on, but I have to remember to keep it on. People go, oh, my Bluetooth's on, I'll turn it off, forgetting that they needed it for certain capabilities. So that's a big problem. Location permissions must be accepted and not revoked. So the app pops up and says, hey, I want to use your location all the time, please. And you go, no. Can't use iBeacons. Or I could say yes. And then I'll look at my device and go, oh, my battery's been eating quite a lot. I'm seeing that. I've got a nice, reasonably new 6S. Battery lasts a few hours. So I'm going through. Facebook's using my location. Turn that off. This is using my location. Turn that off. If I turn off the location for my coffee shop app, I don't get my seamless coffee experience. So not only do you have to convince people to have location on, you have to take advantage of that little message you've got to tell people, please leave your location services on. You have to constantly remind them, if they've turned it off, you've got to turn it back on. If I find I'm not getting my seamless coffee experience, I launch the app, it's just say to me, hey Jim, you've turned your location permissions off. Here's the instructions on how to turn it back on again. I need this to bring you coffee. Power. This has got a single coin cell battery in it. It's supposed to last 3 years. Might last 3 years, might last 6 months, depends on how much transmission power. I can ramp this up, send a signal 70 meters. Or I can ramp it down, send a signal 1 meter. 70 meters, every 100 milliseconds sending a signal. Yeah, in 6 months' time, this is going in the bin. So if we're using anything that's battery powered, you need to worry about batteries going flat. New bigger ones from Estimote got 4 batteries in. It lasts 7 to 10 years, supposedly. Put one of these in your fridge, battery dies really quickly. So you've got to constantly monitor the battery if you're using battery-powered beacons. This is one of the problems that the Brooklyn Museum said they had. They rolled out thousands of beacons across the whole museum, and some of them are going flat. And it's trying to find the ones that are running out or going flat before they affect people's experience. The last thing you want is everyone coming to a big exhibit, walking up to it, not getting the audio experience they're expecting because the beacon has gone flat and you didn't notice. Now, luckily, the vendors are here to help you out. There's vendor SDKs for allow you to do crowdsourced monitoring of battery power. So if you're using Estimote beacons, you're using the Estimote SDK, behind the scenes, it can connect the beacon, get the battery power, feed it back up to their server, and you can monitor online the strength of all your beacons. Other beacon providers have similar capabilities, so you can crowdsource that and monitor for when the battery's about to go flat. But you have to proactively check these battery powers, or you're going to have a bad time. Some beacons run off USB. Estimote do battery-powered ones. Other vendors do USB ones. USB ones are great. Never run out of battery, but you need USB sockets. If you're a museum, you're rolling out 1,000 beacons, you need 1,000 USB sockets. This is not so bad if you've got lots of wall sockets in a fixed room. That's fine. But if you've got an installation that moves, you've got to take your USB power with you. So maybe you have to mix USB powered with battery powered. And then you've obviously got to manage the battery power of those battery beacons. So that's a problem. Signals get blocked. Who here has been to the Louvre in Paris? Who's seen the Mona Lisa? Did you see the Mona Lisa? Or did you see the back of people's heads? Back of people's heads, yes. So this is kind of the usual experience when seeing a famous piece of art. And this is something the Brooklyn Museum suffered with. People are not good transmitters of Bluetooth signals. Walls are not good. Glass is not good. People are not good. And they found they'd have a really popular painting on one wall with a beacon. And on the other wall, a less popular painting with a beacon. And I'll be standing here, and I'm physically closer to this painting. But there's 2 people in front of me. And yet my app thought I was over there, because the strongest signal came from the other side of the room. Although I was closer, people block the signal. So suddenly, I'm looking at a famous painting, and I'm listening to someone talking about a bit of sculptures on the other side of the room. So that is a problem. Now, really, the only solution to this is one the beacon vendors love: more beacons. It's true. The thing is, these beacons are cheap. You know, we're talking $20 for a beacon, so they're cheap. More beacons. Lots of beacons, low power. Rather than relying on a single beacon per installation, per piece of art, maybe put lots of beacons around, maybe do a whole location tracking of where you are in the room. Lots of beacons, lower power. It's an advertising packet, so there's no limit. It's basically can broadcast out. Yeah. I've never heard of a limitation, no. Certainly, if I was able to install an app for everybody, you should all be able to pick up these beacons quite happily. So it's just a broadcast. It's like a radio wave. It's a broadcast. Anyone can better pick it up. So yeah, beacons on the roof, beacons higher up is a good idea. So if you're putting beacons around a room, if you put them up at the top, you get a more direct line of sight to where people are. So think about where the people are going to be standing. Think about pillars. Sometimes you have a big pillar in a room. I was doing a location demo at a co-working space in Bangkok last year. And it was great. We put a load of beacons around the walls, and we were watching on a little indoor location app where we were walking around. And we'll find if we're standing in the way of a pillar, it's got no clue where we are, because there's these great big concrete pillars in the middle. Solution, put beacons all around the pillars. So think about the things that might block your signal. Think about people. If you've got a less popular exhibit, maybe drop a beacon on it. If it's the Mona Lisa, maybe think about you need indoor location. Maybe think about putting your beacons up high so you can get good line of sight. Or down on the floor. Just try and think a lot more about where you're placing your beacons and what power you want to have. Because as well,
How do you manage those beacons? Imagine if you have 1,000 stores, 1,000 beacons each store, like how do you know where they are?
so manufacturers provide SDKs that deal with that kind of stuff for you. So for example, I can go onto the Estimate website, I can see all my beacons, I can configure them all, I can set their IDs, I can set all the information about them, I can set GPS locations, track their power, I can configure it all online, and then all I have to do is connect using their app or their SDK embedded in a consumer application, and it updates them all for me. So they've got really good management suites. But yeah, check with your beacon vendor, because they handle all that stuff really, really well. So yeah.
Just on the connection of line of sight, is it a preferred option more beacons as opposed to bridging beacons? I mean, I can see what you're saying about line of sight and the block.
They're not really
on the same sort of network.
Well, they're not really the same network as such. You've got all the beacons might have the same proximity IDs. So if you're picking up multiple beacons, you want to get obviously all the signals from all the beacons coming through. So if you have lots of beacons, you get lots of data coming in about your location that you can use to then resolve down to a more accurate location.
Right.
So yeah, other problems. Signals don't get blocked. You know, I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive after signals get blocked. Signals don't get blocked. So if I wanted to put a beacon in my coffee shop, I could put a number of beacons around the walls, or I could stick one beacon right by the front door. Problem with that is, if it's right by the front door, every time I walk past the coffee shop, somebody's making me a coffee, and I'm charged for a coffee. And I walk back past the coffee shop, and I get charged for another coffee. There was a coffee shop in London, Taylor Street, fantastic coffee. I used to walk past it every day, and they had an app based off GPS. And so every time I walk past it on the way to the office, you've checked in at Taylor Street. Do you want to order a coffee? No. And I walk back to my desk. You've checked in at Taylor Street. Do you want a coffee? No. So you have to think about where to put your beacons so that the signals don't leak. If you've got nice windows, maybe put your beacons a little bit further back so the signal doesn't leak. Test the strength of your signal outside, inside. Find out how good the signal is. And again, more beacons, less power. You don't get leakage. I was chatting to a gentleman back at Xamarin Evolve back in April about this, and he was putting beacons in cinemas. One beacon in each cinema screen, really, really powerful signal to cover the whole screen. And he was finding, as people were walking in to the screens, usually little passageways on the side, they'd walk in and they couldn't tell which screen you were in, because there's two very, very powerful beacons sending a signal. The wall wasn't enough to block the signal. The answer? More beacons, lower power. Also think about a concept they call entry beacons. So you have maybe a different ID for a set of beacons just around your entrance. So you have a number of beacons, all very low power, in a ring around the corridor or the doorway on the way in. Very low power. And when you walk in, pretty much the only place where you can get a good signal is right in the middle of those beacons. So if you've got a corridor, like in a cinema, you've got that little corridor as you walk down the side towards your seat, maybe put some beacons around there. Low power, but enough that you can only detect it when you're in the middle of that ring and your app wakes up. So have a think about what you can do with those kind of beacons. Limits. So you asked about connection limits. As far as I know, there aren't any limits. Obviously, your device has got to process, if you're ranging, your device has to process all those. So it's got to go through the list of beacons. If there's 1,000 beacons there, it may take a long time, so you may not get the beacons you want. But the biggest limit you have is 20 regions. So when you're thinking about your IDs, when you're thinking about monitoring for regions, you can only do 20 on iOS. So if you want to have a coffee shop and you put beacons in it, you open up a second branch, you put beacons in it, and you want a different proximity ID for each branch, that's fine if you've got 2 branches. But when you take over the world, you become the next Starbucks, you've got different IDs in every single coffee shop, suddenly you're going to run out of regions. So maybe you want to have all the IDs, all the proximity IDs the same, and then discriminate between the coffee shops using major and minor version numbers. Maybe use the major for your branch, minor for which floor in the coffee shop you're on. So think about how you want to build up your hierarchy of your beacon IDs. You can only register for 20 proximity regions.
Are your major and minor only numeric, or can they be alphanumeric?
They're numeric, they're 16-bit integers. So we've got a fairly large number of them, but yeah, they are numeric. And the last thing, these IDs are not yours. These IDs are not fixed. These IDs can be anything. Anyone can set any ID to anything. I can set all my beacons the same proximity ID, major and minor. No one can stop me. They're not yours. You don't own the IDs. So if you were a supermarket, supermarket A, and you put some beacons in your ice cream section so that anyone with supermarket A's app could walk in, walk over to the ice creams, bzz, notification, Magnum ice creams, 10% off. Awesome. I'll have some ice creams, thank you very much. But there's nothing stopping supermarket B going into your supermarket, monitoring for those beacons, just using a BLE Explorer, any kind of Bluetooth scanner, detecting the packet, getting the ID, monitoring for ID in their app, and then if you've got supermarket B's app installed, you walk past the ice cream section, supermarket A, bzz, Magnum's half price at supermarket B, plus the rest of your shopping's cheaper. Great for guerrilla marketing, not so great if your supermarket A and your Magnums are not at the best price. So you don't own your IDs. You don't register them. Anyone can use anyone's ID. So just be a little bit wary of that. Certainly there's been suggestions that restaurants that use beacons under the table so you can pay from your phone. So I'm sitting at a table, I know which table I'm at because it's the beacon with the strongest signal, it's my table, I can pay for my dinner. I could sit at a different table, I could get a little Bluetooth device that broadcasts out a packet with a faked transmission power so that over here on my iPhone, it looks like the closest beacon is actually that one on the table over there. And I'm paying for someone else's lunch. So it's a bit of a security concern. There are some thoughts around security. I mean, Estimo have got a whole rotating ID system, but you're only limited to 20 regions. So even with rotating IDs, you still have a bit of a problem around that. So there's no real good solution to that. So if you need these for any kind of secure processing, if you need this for payments and you're worried about security, don't use them. Have a look at other technologies like Eddystone Secure UUID instead of iBeacons, because iBeacons are not secure. Last little thing, where to get beacons? Well, obviously some of you come here and have got beacons. Right, who wants a beacon? You were first. There you go, sir. That's the last one. I don't have any more to give out, sorry. So where to get beacons? These are various manufacturers of beacons: Gimbal, Radius, Contact, and these Estimo fellows who I think are absolutely awesome. Now, if you want to use just this basic iOS SDK, doesn't matter what you use, they all work. If you want to use the vendor SDKs, because you want to access more awesome, you want to access temperature checking, crowdsourcing of firmware updates, crowdsourcing of battery power, you have to use the manufacturer's SDKs. If you use Gimbal, Radius, Contact, they have Objective-C code, they have Java code. Now, we're not animals, we don't do Objective-C, apart from you. We don't do Java, no, we do Xamarin, because Xamarin rocks. And luckily, if you use Estimo, they've wrapped it for you. Xamarin allows you to wrap iOS and Java SDKs. You can bind it yourself. People have done it. There's open source wrappers around Gimbal and Radius. But if you use the Estimo one, those nice guys at Xamarin actually did it for you with the help from those nice guys at Estimo. It's fully open source, fully updated, fantastic component. And you can use this SDK in your Xamarin apps, and you can use it to do things like crowdsourcing battery, automatically pushing firmware updates. You know, you want to roll out a firmware update, you can just put their SDK in your app, and one of your customers with your app unknowingly is downloading the firmware update in the background and pushing it onto the beacon for you. So there's loads of stuff. They've got really fantastic online SDKs. All the vendors have fantastic online CMS control for tracking your beacons, knowing where they are. If you're crowdsourcing battery power using SDKs, you can get all that online. Great CMS control, just really, really good systems. And that's where the beacon vendors are making their money. They don't make much money out of selling the hardware. They make their money out of the online cloud maintenance systems. So if you're thinking about doing a big beacon rollout, don't think about managing them yourselves. Look at what the vendors can provide you, because they have really great management systems. So that, in the space of exactly 1 hour, is iBeacons. They allow you to create context-aware and indoor location-aware mobile apps. They allow you to empower your mobile users to be able to walk into your coffee shop and have coffee arrive. They give you the Uber of coffee. So thank you very much for listening. Please evaluate this session. You can win some stuff. It says from your PC or tablet, visit this. It should work on a Mac and an iPhone as well, for those of you who like a bit of Apple. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. And I know we've had a few questions go along. If anyone else wants to ask questions, stick around.